Thank you. And I was actually hoping that Professor will not allow me to have my comment, that he was, then I would just leave. But nevertheless, I was trying to listen very carefully to what was said also, and I would like to share with you some comments. I also would like to say at the beginning that one of my dreams is that one day we will wake up in a Europe, in a union, which is not just drifting somewhere, but that is really moving on the path which we understand where it goes. I'm not talking about finalité politique, but really about more control of the path on which we are moving forward. And that's why I think that it's extremely important that when we plan, when we look forward and when we think where Europe is moving, it is important probably also to understand what is the current situation and why the current situation is not the best place and time for us to be, and that when we design the change or when we impact the change, that we really go towards where solutions are or can be found. And where we stand today, I think it's very clear that what will matter for the future steps of the Union is the lack of trust and legitimacy. I think we talk about deficit and for decades already, but I think we have never been in a moment, in a period where there is the lack of legitimacy of what Europe is offering is at such a high level. The second issue, which I think is important to pick up from the current situation, is all those different visions, divergences, and also different situations, divisions across Europe. I'm saying that because we talked a lot about the wanted fragmentation or treaty-based fragmentation, but I think in Europe there is a lot of bad or wrong or not based in the treaty fragmentation, which has a lot of sources which one can discuss. But I think this fact is extremely important because this kind of fragmentation is actually undermining the European Union and is having also strong impact on the decisions which are made. It's also important, I think, to see the political dimension of the current crisis, which they are everywhere and they have very different substance, but there is also across the crisis, I think there is a political dimension of those crises, and that's why in the context also of the problems with legitimacy, those crises, the political decisions cannot just be of technocratic nature. I think we have to see the political dimension of this very clearly. And just one more observation on the unwanted fragmentation that we see in Europe. It makes the unity very fragile because this unwanted fragmentation leads us to a situation where we don't want to talk about difficult issues and where we are unable to address the most difficult issues, like, for example, treaty change. You might remember that over the last years, the treaty change has been a word which you couldn't actually use. In some political groups, maybe it was an acceptable word, but mostly not. Now, with the Brexit hopefully being avoided, probably the treaty change will become a politically correct word to use. Now, I also would like to, listening to the discussion, I would like to say that any move forward towards whatever model, that's another issue, we think Europe is evolving. I think we have to pass through a period of debates at European and national, local levels where clear responses will be formulated that will give us what is a boring issue probably, which is so-called European narrative. But I think today this is a great challenge, and I think that we have to help citizens to respond to the question what Europe is today for and why it makes sense to go deeper in some areas, and what is our common European interest. And I think that those issues will not just pop up naturally. I think we need a process of debating future of Europe. I also think that any move forward today would, in Europe, with further reforms in whatever the area, cannot happen without a clear accountability of the move. So without clear support by citizens, and I think accountability or legitimacy or whatever you call it, it's quite a different challenge today than it used to be. Why? Because I think that national leadership is not really today a source of for Europe, of legitimacy for Europe, for action at European level. If you look at national level, most likely what you see is a total lack of pro-European thinking. You don't see really a respect of obligations which are made. We heard it very often from Mr. Tusk, who was saying, yes, we decided, but next day nothing happened. So I think that this, including when I look at some member states, probably especially new ones, even the internal national institutional capacities to respect the obligations or to do what we are committed to do are also declining. And I think that we didn't move at all beyond the traditional European understanding of democracy, which is national democracy. I think in the Parliament we spare no efforts. I think there is a lot being done, but I don't think we are really successful on this. And certainly the radicalization which goes today across all existential issues, I think, in Europe, takes us back also on this potential of transnational democracy or European democracy. So I think that the last years, the crisis and what we called technical governments, I think they will called differently depending on the member states, and also international institutions which were making decisions on behalf of Europe, because Europe was in fact behind or ahead of all those decisions and was visible to citizens. This has also, I think, affected this accountability challenge today. So I think that we should, whatever we will be doing, we should avoid a situation which was quite, I think, current recently, is that the big political change, which sometimes are agreed, sold to the public, and then they are simply transformed into small technical decisions of Brussels administration. We could hear it often from French government, this complaint, but we have a lot of that, and I think this is not helping with the accountability and with the political visibility of acceptability of Europe. On institutional setup, I would like to largely agree with all those who believe that we have to make all the change and legally based fragmentation within the check and balances that we have today. But we suffer, I think, quite often from the lack of really of common understanding or of clear definition of competences, and it is especially the case of European Council, which is a bad example of how the definitions of competences can change. EMU, which used to be Herman van Rompuy, is now Jean-Claude Juncker. We will see what will happen with migration in the future, but it's like spontaneous ad hoc issues which are picked up by the European Council, which I think is not helping with the check and balances system to be kept in order. We have also spontaneous emergence of competences by European Council, if I can use this example again. Even if you think of who chose the legal basis for ESM, it was not the European Commission. And of course the Parliament, for obvious reasons, we don't like this, but this is happening, and some colleagues call it that the European Council is facilitating the process of lawmaking, but we have a different perspective on this, so it's not a facilitation of legal process. I think there is a certain doses of mess there. And also there is another issue related to the institutional setup, and it's evolution, which is linked to the fact that we expect these institutions to also service subsets of member states, and why it is envisaged in the treaty for the Council and for the European Commission. It is not at all envisaged for the European Parliament, so legislators probably did it not just by hasard, but it's fully justified. So it is an issue that we still have to look at more carefully. Now, I also think that the fact that there are so many institutions now which are put in place mostly for EMU, for euro area. Additionally, finally, there will be such a big critical mass of those institutions which are servicing only a certain amount of member states and issues, that it will have eventually also the impact on the general check and balances system in the European Union. So we have to look carefully at what happens to institutions and where we are with the shifts in the check and balances system. Like the Commission, which used to be the guardian and also did some executive, now it's just fully fledged implementator, also a controller of implementation of the new legal frameworks and new policies. So we have clearly also a shift in the role of the Commission, and I think that this, with the better lawmaking, this proportion between how much happens through legislation, how much happens in Europe through coordination or through implementation through different ways and through coordination of national assets and resources. This is, I think, a big avenue which we should look carefully at. Two words on parliamentarian system. I think we made a big step forward with the Spitzenkandidaten. We are trying now to consolidate it. I don't think we will be successful, if I can say it carefully now. But I think clearly, I fully agree with you that European Parliament needs strengthening of European identity of European citizens, so that we can really bring what citizens expect from us, because because the legitimacy of the European Council, of the Council in general, is a legitimacy linked to national interests, and European Parliament legitimacy is the legitimacy linked to, I think, common European interests, so that's quite a different type of legitimacy. And now on the still, I think a few words to what Roberto was saying before. For me, actually, what is happening now to all those reforms triggered by the crisis related to the euro governance, for me, actually, it is amazing that member states do not feel that the crisis, and it has been a big crisis, a deep crisis, that the crisis did not give them actually legitimacy to move forward with the reforms. So they are all the time like being reluctant, whatever new idea now the insurance, deposit insurance scheme comes, everybody is protesting. So it's like there's no understanding that we had the crisis because of those things not being really in our system. So I think that it is amazing that this is not really understood by our member states, by our leaders. And I think that that's because of that, actually, the EMU has not arrived yet at a condition of what I would call an acceptable equilibrium. So it is an important thing. Road to a new treaty, because you mentioned, Professor Fabbrini, you didn't use the word treaty, but something close to the need of a formal change. And some of you might know that in AFCO committee we are working on the reports. One is exploiting the potential of the current treaties, and it's still a lot of space there to use. And the other one by Guy Verhofstadt is looking beyond the current treaties into new institutional setup. But the major problem with the treaty is, of course, in addition to its ratification, but the major problem is the method of adopting it, of getting a new treaty or getting a change of the treaty. And this is where I think we have to be innovative, and this is where I think we have to think of good examples that were created by bad things that happened to us, which is the way ESM and fiscal compact were adopted, which is intergovernmental agreement, which is then people join, or member states join and ratify, and then nobody has the right to veto the new solution. So I don't know how we can combine it with one union and unity of the union, but I think we have to think anew at the method of adopting the new treaties if we after, of course, exploiting fully the potential of what we have. But I don't think we can really move forward, especially with EMU, without reaching out to new strong legal basis that will not be questioned by the German Constitutional Court every second time something appears. And so that's what I would like to say. Thank you.